Good afternoon, everyone. As Victoria says, I'm Howard Cooper, and I've spent many years in the UK nuclear industry, many years working in quality in UK nuclear and defence. I know many of the other speakers and probably many of the folks on the call. And I've got a fair amount of experience in quality organisations, development of quality cultures, cross-alignment between quality and nuclear safety, and I'll talk a little bit about that. My short presentation is really just going to set the scene on some of the longer discussions that are coming up, and just frame it in terms of some of the history and the undoubted cross-fertilisation between quality culture, the topic today, and safety culture and nuclear safety, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to start with a little bit of history, because as Vic has reminded everyone, I know a lot of the history because I've lived through an awful lot of it. If we think about the nuclear power industry, and by that I mean civil and military power generation, nuclear weapons manufacture, development and associated activities, fuel manufacture, waste management, decommissioning. We're now well into our nearly ninth decade of that industry. And I think it's fair to say that in the course of those 8 decades, the undoubted promise of the industry has been affected by a number of challenges. There have been major incidents through the course of that, and you can probably, everyone on this call has heard of some, if not all of those, particular events which have set back the industry, and those things do tend to grab the headlines. But again, if you go back into the kind of 80s and 90s, the nuclear industry was beset by operational performance issues. If you looked at power reactors, they were offline as often as they were online. Power outages, power spikes, unplanned trips, meant that, the infrastructure around the world couldn't rely on nuclear to supply the amount of electricity with the consistency that was really needed. You don't have to look very far in the world of project delivery to find many examples of nuclear projects, not just power reactors, but big decommissioning projects and big waste management projects where cost and schedule are adverse compared to an original baseline. So it's got a reputation for being expensive and slow. Even from the earliest days of those 8 decades, there was always a question of, well, what about the waste? We know the waste has got to be dealt with. We know the waste has radiotoxic properties. We know the waste has a very long life cycle. That in many people's mind has kind of coloured the benefits that nuclear power might give us. And it's true that the industry has got not the best reputation. There are suspicious thoughts and minds out there, of course driven by the major events, but also its association with weapons, the long-term concerns about waste, those cost issues, and to be blunt, some poor communications decisions by people telling not whole truths, if not outright lies, in respect of some of the incidents and the events, whether you're talking about the USSR denying Chernobyl or our own government back in the day, its response around the Windscale fire. So we've got a collective adverse impact in terms of both our performance and our perception. And really that then led into the development of all of this worldwide knowledge base around nuclear safety. Driven principally by those major events, there were actions taken by regulators, legislators, industry bodies to really learn the lessons around them. And they kind of led us to kind of 2 similar related concepts. The one is nuclear safety. And I think of this in terms of activities, processes, and actions that contribute towards the delivery of nuclear safety. How we design things, how we construct things, how we operate things, how we maintain them, how we modify, decommission and demolish them. And the related topic of nuclear safety culture. and that's the behaviours and attitudes exhibited by individuals and groups and organisations working in the nuclear industry. And there has been a lot of work across those organisations across many decades, developing not only these concepts, but more importantly, the kind of supporting tools and processes that allow those topics to be adequately addressed. And I've just provided there, what I consider to be a really good definition of nuclear safety culture. I took it from WANO. There's a similar one for INPO, IAEA. They've all got versions, but they all talk about collective behaviours, leaders and individuals, emphasising safety over competing goals. And you might say, well, that's great, Howard, but what about quality then? This is the quality core, and that's a fair point. But I think we have to acknowledge that quality has found a home with nuclear safety over the past several decades. I often hear today's quality is tomorrow's nuclear safety, and by its very nature, many of the things that deliver nuclear safety, whether they're components or aspects of a design or construction, have very high requirements, very high specifications, and that means that they need to be delivered to a high quality. They need to meet exacting standards. And if you then look at it the other way and start looking at quality events and issues, you again find this analogy in that failures of quality approaches and processes, design, specification, quality grading, quality planning, are generally enabled by failures of leadership, behaviours, attitudes, and culture. And I've investigated more than my fair share of events in my 30 odd years in the nuclear industry, and there's always a direct cause around the system and the process, but there's also always a cultural cause around leadership and behaviours. So in my world, if we've got a quality approach that's equivalent to nuclear safety, then our quality culture needs to be equivalent to the nuclear safety culture. So you then get to the question, why do we need that strong quality culture in nuclear? Well, if every incident event is enabled by a failure in culture, then a strong quality culture supports and underpins a quality approach. And what does that give us in terms of benefits? Well, an effective quality culture adopted by everyone, not just by the quality team, because we don't do the quality, as we all know, supports a number of things. Primarily, it supports nuclear safety. Doing things right from a quality perspective delivers components that will work and deliver their intended duty. It supports sustainability. If we have a good right first time, we don't have to do a load of rework. We don't have to remanufacture valves and components and elements that fail. It supports good cost and schedule performance. A well-planned, well-executed project will deliver cost and schedule reliability. It supports improvement. We're all aware of the many tools that exist, whether you want to use DMAIC or 5Y or Lean Six Sigma. They allow us to improve approaches and processes so that we can better deliver right first time performance. Often overlooked, quality does enable innovation. We often think of innovation as people in rooms thinking great thoughts on their own, but systems and processes enable that. And we're seeing more and more recourse to future technologies. I'm involved in a piece of work looking at AI and machine learning to compile and submit LTRs without poor buggers having to read and review them and go through all of that fun and games again. The good news is we don't have to start from scratch. I did a quick comparison between the traits of a nuclear safety culture on the left-hand side and the principles of quality management from our good friend ISO 9001 on the right-hand side, and the quality competence framework from the profession map. And you can see there, leadership is through all three. People and individual accountability and environment is through all three. Decision-making, governance, assurance is through all three. Work processes and systems and management systems are through all three. So we've got a real commonality between what good nuclear safety culture looks like and what a good quality culture needs to encompass. And in terms of a path forward, the starting point for me is always to start the discussion. And that's great to see it as a topic starting a discussion today. We have plenty of established tools. ISO 19443 is out there. That's a great way to start thinking about improving our quality culture.